They will never have this cleaned up. There is no technology that exists on Earth. Of course, the ongoing radiation is in the water in the Pacific Ocean. It's a real solid supposition that it is at least a major contributing factor, if not the sole reason, that we are seeing such extreme die-offs of marine life.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. My God, with so much going on in the world, of course, we've been covering the global economic collapse in detail, and now I want to turn our attention back to the onslaught against our environment and all things radiation. I have on the line Libbe Halevy. She heads up the Nuclear Hot Seat. That's her YouTube channel. She also has a podcast by the same name. How are you, Libbe?
I'm doing wonderful, Sean. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming on. You know, Fukushima is something that I should be spending a lot more time talking about. Environmentally speaking, Libbe, there's a onslaught against humanity that's coming at us from a multiple vector point standpoint. The Fukushima situation is just one of those. It's, I think, destroying the Pacific Ocean. So first, a little bit about yourself, though. Tell us how you got into the business of exposing the NRC and explaining all things anti-nuclear.
I actually got recruited by a bad piece of timing. Back in 1979, I was living in Los Angeles and wanted to visit a friend of mine from Boston, who it turned out had just married her longtime boyfriend and moved with him when he got a job at the Harrisburg airport. He was an airplane mechanic. So she moved to a small town in Pennsylvania. And when I flew out to visit her, she greeted me at the airport and said, "Oh, you've come to the right place to cool out." And 5 days later, only 1 mile from the home in which she lived and in which I was staying, the nuclear reactor at 3 Mile Island malfunctioned. We did not know how bad it was. That was all hidden from us. We did not pay much attention to the media. They didn't even have a TV set. And so it was a big shock on the third day when I was alone in their house and a loudspeaker went down the middle of the street. I actually had to run downstairs and open the door in order to hear them say, "Stay inside, keep your doors and windows closed, and do not go outdoors unless you absolutely have to." For all I knew at that point, I thought that the thing could possibly explode, and I was only 1 mile away, which would have put me ground zero at Armageddon. Well, it didn't explode, and we did evacuate, and I came back to Los Angeles, but was too much in post-traumatic stress to really be an activist. So I did not become involved in the issue until Fukushima happened. And within 3 months, I started a podcast. I'd never done it before. I called it Nuclear Hot Seat. And I said, let's see where this is going to go. And we've now been on the air every week for over 4.5 years. There are over 240 episodes archived on my website, nuclearhotseat.com. And we cover everything in the nuclear arena with a special emphasis on the reactors, what's wrong with the reactors, and everything that is created that's a problem in the fuel chain, from digging the uranium out of the ground and leaving the tailings where they poison usually indigenous people, all the way through to the fact that nuclear waste is the industry's dirty little secret. There's nothing they can do with it, and it remains radioactive and poisonous to the human genome for 480,000 years. That's plutonium. When you take the half-life of 24,000 years and multiply it times the 20 half-life cycles it takes in order for that stuff to go flat and match what is our current background.
Well, we're all waking up to how horrifying the radiation is and how dangerous these nuclear plants are. Fukushima, let's talk about it, because I haven't spoken with anybody about it in a very long time. We spoke with Helen Caldicott, and she tells us that there is nothing they can do about it. And of course, on March 12, 2011, that's when the tsunami hit, devastating the Tepco nuclear power plants at Fukushima. And I think, if memory serves, Libbe, plant 3 and 4 blew up. And right now I'm looking at news from CNN. Japan Fukushima cleanup may take up to 40 years, according to Tepco. They're never going to be able to clean it up because they can't get to the corium. They can't get to the plutonium. It's all melted into the ground.
That's right. First of all, I want to correct something you said that is a common misconception that has been put out by the nuclear industry, but is not true. And that is that we've been led to believe that what caused the meltdowns and that's multiple, 3 meltdowns at Fukushima, was the tsunami. It's not. There were reports that came in early on and later were expunged from the records, but I saw them and took them out, that said that the workers were running out of the plant as of the earthquake because the steam pipes were already breaking. They were already shattering, and steam was being released. That means that the cooling system was already compromised by the earthquake before the tsunami. But of course, to the nuclear industry's thinking, a tsunami is a rare event and you've got to be next to an ocean. So it's not that common. It doesn't apply elsewhere. Whereas earthquakes can happen everywhere, especially since fracking has become so common and created earthquake scenarios around the country. That's number one. The corium, yes, their meltdown, the explosion happened in Unit 3. There was also meltdown in Units 1 and 2. The corium, which is the melted core, is down into the earth in what we can only presume is a China syndrome scenario, because they cannot locate it because it is so hot, it is so radioactive that not only can no human being be anywhere around it and live, the robots fry. So they keep coming up with new and improved robots that don't do the job because their electronics cannot survive the radiation. As to the cleanup taking 40 years, that's a pipe dream kicking it down the road. They will never have this cleaned up. There is no technology that exists on Earth. And the only thing that has saved Japan is that this happened on the coast and the prevailing winds blew most of the airborne radiation out to sea. And of course, the ongoing radiation is in the water in the Pacific Ocean, which, while we cannot prove it, it's a real solid supposition that it is at least a major contributing factor, if not the sole reason, that we are seeing such extreme die-offs of marine life. Starting 4 years ago with the starfish, and since then it's been sardines, mackerel, which have disappeared. Salmon have been severely compromised. They have found radiation in bluefin tuna, and there are now huge die-offs of the whales, dolphins, seabirds, other creatures of the sea. It's a terrible situation, and it's not getting any better.
Yeah, and I want to give credit to Kevin Blanche, who coined the term Pacific genocide. I think that's what it is. And what I want to do is I want to just step back in time and let's talk about the explosions. And I want to talk to you about Unit 3, which we saw blow sky high. Now, that was a General Electric Mark I reactor, on top of which the spent fuel rods were stored. So people need to understand, as we're told about repairing the situation and Tepco will get it under control in 40 years, when it blew sky high, that's all she wrote. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is when we see images of these units, sometimes we'll see these fuel pools as covered by the mainstream Mockingbird media. It can't possibly be the same fuel pool. I mean, it blew up, and then they show us this pristine fuel pool as they talk about trying to remove the rods. Now, I'm going back a couple of years because I don't even see that covered anymore. But can you help people understand how serious the situation is when Unit 3 literally blew up?
First of all, at Fukushima, they did store all these spent fuel rods from ever in these units on the roof. That was the design that they had. And every fuel bundle consists of multiple fuel rods. And when they say spent, they just mean it's no longer useful in terms of generating the explosions for the electricity. However, it does not mean it's spent in terms of radioactivity, because every one of those fuel rods contains weapons-grade plutonium. As they call it, a side product, I think it's just a clever way of manufacturing weapons-grade plutonium and passing it off on the public as, oh, well, we're really giving you some energy out of this. Be that as it may, when that blew sky high, it blew particles of the fuel rods, the radioactive particles, into the jet stream, where it circles the Earth in companionship with radioactive material from every atmospheric bomb test and explosion that has ever taken place. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Trinity, which was the test before, and all of the tests. There's still radioactive stuff up there. When that particulate matter mixes with the humidity that forms raindrops, and then when it gets colder, snow, rain has to form around the particulate matter, and when it does and the material is radioactive, it brings the radioactivity down to Earth. And this can happen anywhere that the jet stream and the rain, the need for rain, the humidity for rain that forms, intersect with each other. And that's why after Fukushima, there was not only the plume that came off the facility towards the United States and did hit us, despite the fact that mainstream media, I love what you called it, Mockingbird media, did stop They stopped reporting on the plume after the fourth day. They got edicts from on high, cut it out, don't say that word, and don't talk about it. But the plume hit the West Coast, and then the rainouts happened in places like Oklahoma, St. Louis, throughout New England, especially Vermont got hit hard. We have reports of the rainouts happening in Europe. And of course, mainstream media and the quote unquote experts who just cover things up like crazy were talking about, well, gee, we don't know why there could possibly be any radiation happening here, when it's absolute basic nuclear activism 101 to understand exactly how rainouts happen and how the radiation could get there.
Yeah, and just for your background, you probably already know this. It was the CIA who very proudly bragged about getting the mainstream media to report on any story they wanted to within 24 hours. Operation Mockingbird, that's why we call them the Mockingbird mainstream media, because the CIA can get any story they would like out there in the news right away. But God forbid they actually cover Fukushima and this ongoing, really genocide at this point, because nothing can be done about it. Nothing is being done about it. And just to illustrate for folks how serious the situation is, let's talk about the decontamination waste that's piling up. I mean, we've seen this drone video of absolutely horrifying amounts of this radioactive waste being stored in bags by the Pacific Ocean. My God, I mean, wait for the next tsunami when all that gets carried right into the Pacific.
First of all, let's put decontamination in quotes because that's their term. That's not what's going on. What they're doing is they're scraping away a certain amount of soil from areas in Fukushima Prefecture that have shown to be hotspots. They're usually very close to the radiation monitors that have been placed there so that the immediate area of the radiation monitor is down, where if you step maybe 5 feet, 10 feet away, the rates are much higher. That's number one. Number two, all of this material was put into plastic bags. I mean, think of your trash bags, your garbage bags, the dark green ones, placed in these bags with no place to store them. So they found areas and they started piling them up and piling them up. There are mountains of this stuff. Then, sometime in the last 6 months, I forget exactly when, there were floods in the area of Fukushima Prefecture that washed many of these bags into the water supply where they reopened. Also, many of these bags are now 3-4 years old and they are decomposing in the sun, in the wind, in the rain, and all of the other elements that it's exposed to. And then the wind comes up, it whips it up, and it gets redistributed again. So there is no way to ultimately, completely, and absolutely clean this up. And that's why nuclear waste is the industry's dirty little secret. And they're doing everything in their power to create the illusion that they're taking care of it when really there is nothing on this planet as of yet that can neutralize the radiation. There is no research that is known. There may be some secret stuff, but there's no known research being done on how to neutralize radiation, if such a thing is even possible. And we're being contaminated from multiple sources all the time and have been starting 70 years ago with the Manhattan Project and the first explosions.
Yeah, well, we cover in detail. It's really the core function of SGT report. We cover the madness of the controlling elite. I mean, Rockefeller eugenics, Rothschild eugenics, we cover it all from vaccines to this nuclear topic, because now what we see in the mainstream Mockingbird media is we see them talking about hormesis. They're telling us that a little bit of radiation is good for you. That's how they want to cure the problem. They want to convince the people with propaganda that radiation isn't all that bad. Let's talk about radiation levels in the United States. Are you seeing spikes? What type of information can we convey to the audience so that they understand that this is no longer contained to just Fukushima and Japan? It's our problem now too. And then we can bridge into Indian Point or anything else you want to talk about.
In terms of radiation, there is a great group that monitors the radiation around the country because this is a moving target and it changes all the time, never for the better. The group is called radcast.org. You can also find them on Facebook at No Nukes NW, which is Northwest because they're based in Oregon. And they provide the best information about radiation, the levels. They have people reporting to them all the time. They can also give you guidance on purchasing a really good radiation monitor if you should choose to do so. In terms of the radiation levels here, you have to realize it's not just coming from Fukushima. It's coming from uranium mines where the materials have not been properly taken care of once the ground has been dug up and the mine has been dug out. So that it's usually native people who are compromised there. It is coming from leftover radiation from the Nevada test site, which went all over the United States. The prevailing winds pushed it from the west part of the country to the east part of the country. Right now in North St. Louis, there's a horrific situation where it's been discovered that at a Superfund site at Westlake Landfill, there is more than 175,000 tons of high level radioactive waste left over from World War II buried in a landfill where since the 1970s it was first gotten there and buried there, an entire set of subdivisions and a middle class neighborhood has grown up around it not knowing what they were being exposed to. There are huge cancer clusters that have been discovered. They found clusters of appendix cancer, and the experts in cancer care, most of them have never even heard of appendix cancer. There, and this is the site of tremendous protests that are going on because at an adjacent landfill, there's an underground fire that is encroaching on the buried radioactive waste. And if the two, and they haven't been able to stop the fire in 5 years. If those two intersect, the radioactive waste with the landfill fire, we can kiss St. Louis goodbye. And there are so many other ways of contamination happening. And if anyone is wondering, well, gee, is this having any impact on our health? Just check such things as how high the cancer rates have been rising and how quickly they have been rising. Cancer used to be a rare disease. It's now estimated in 1 out of every 2 of us are going to get cancer sometime in our lives. That did not used to be the case. Look at infertility rates because we know that radiation impacts our fertility, our entire reproductive tract. And in vitro fertilization was unknown 40 years ago. And now it is being required for women to be able to get pregnant because so many cannot. Birth defects, autism. There are I can go on and on. Dr. Caldicott, I'm sure, went on about the impact on the heart muscle and on bones and on teeth. Now we have this false, ludicrous propaganda manipulation called hormesis, which I always refer to as, no, if you believe it, it's hormesis, that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is actually considering, seriously considering, making their standard for determining whether there is radiation risk from a situation or not. We have been measuring radiation risk by something called linear no threshold since the dawn of the nuclear age. This goes back to Dr. John Goffman, and what it means is that there is no safe dose of radiation. It is cumulative in the body. We're talking about dental x-rays, we're talking about chest x-rays, MRIs, and all the rest that we get exposed to, the radium on the dial of old watches. All of this comes into our body, and there's no threshold below which it is safe to be exposed. The hormesis whores, which is what they are putting across the false premise that, well, a little bit of radiation, it ain't so bad. There's a wonderful doctor in England, Dr. Ian Fairley. He can be found at IANFAIRLIE dot, and I forget if it's .com or .org, excuse me. He has done research on this, completely footnoted, absolutely reliable. Go to his site and read what he has to say about hormesis. In 7 pages, including the footnotes, you will understand exactly why the NRC is trying to set us up to never again understand the magnitude of the impact on our health, our survival, our genetic structure, meaning all future generations, that is happening from radiation exposure today.
Yeah, no, it's monstrous. And I should mention my friend Lonnie Clark. She's an activist. She brought me up to speed on hormesis, and I neglected to mention that we have spoken about these issues fairly recently at SGT Report when I interviewed Lonnie Clark. She's just a great person, a real truth teller. Do you know Lonnie?
Lonnie and I are great buddies. We swap information all the time. She actually credits Nuclear Hot Seat with inspiring her to do her show, Age of Fission. And we're in touch probably at least once every week or every other week, just commiserating or keeping our spirits up or laughing about some insanity that is happening in the nuclear industry, because sometimes you just have to laugh because you don't understand how these people could be such Looney Tunes about the entire future of life on the planet.
Yeah, they literally have no respect for God's creation. I mean, we get into all sorts of issues here at SG2 Report. We don't have time to talk about spiritual warfare, but these people are demons in the way that they're allowing the planet to literally fry. They don't care. We talk about eugenics a lot, as I mentioned, but we don't have time to get into all that stuff right now. Let's talk a little bit, though, before we let you go, at least a little bit about Porter Ranch and that horrific methane leak. What's your take on that? Is it as dire as we're led to believe? I know that hundreds of people have been evacuated from the area, and now they're talking about formaldehyde in the air. It's extremely toxic. What do you make of what's going on at Porter Ranch? I mean, talk about pouring salt in the wound. We have Fukushima on the Pacific Coast. They're rolling out Agenda 21 policies in California in earnest, and now we got this methane leak. What's your take?
First of all, I only live 20 miles away, so this is an area of real concern for me, and I have attended one of the town hall meetings about it. It's methane, it's benzene, it's other additives, and I'm not familiar with the entire range of Porter Ranch, which is so complex. I can only take one complex issue at a time. However, what I have been following, and I'm about the only one reporting on this, is the fact that one of the effluents that is being released at Porter Ranch is radon. Radon is released from fracking because fracking fractures uranium. It releases because fracking fractures uranium. It then decays into radium, which then decays into radon gas. So any place you've got fracking, you've got nuclear contamination, you've got radiation contamination, and radon is being released. Radon is a heavier than air gas. That's why it usually pools in basements. It's naturally when it's naturally occurring. The problem here is that it is a lower gas. The methane and benzene go up into the air. So it is rolling down into the San Fernando Valley. Now, radon has a half-life of 3.8 days, which sounds like 8, not too bad. But it takes 10 to 20 half-life cycles for it to go flat. So we're talking about anywhere from 38 to 86 days that radon is active and radioactive. But that's not where the danger ends, because when it decays, it turns into radioactive polonium and, even worse, radioactive lead. Radioactive lead-210 has a half-life of 22.3 years, which means it is radioactive for as much as 440 years. And then when it decays, you're still stuck with lead. And we all know what lead can do, especially to the nervous systems and developing brains of children. So we have a problem in the San Fernando Valley from the radium alone from Porter Ranch that is not going to go away.
I'm almost afraid to report on this stuff from the perspective that the news is so bad geopolitically, economically, and now environmentally that people are going to want to just curl up into a ball and and just stay in bed all day, because what can we do? Is there anything that we can do as activists, as informed Americans, to put an end to any of this stuff? Because I think the fracking thing's out of control too. I mean, we follow the fracking-induced earthquakes very closely, as reported on by Dutch Sense and BP Earthwatch and a lot of these other great channels. The fracking thing's out of control. The nuclear industry's out of control, and it just seems like there's not a damn thing being done about it. What can we do?
First of all, listen to Nuclear Hot Seat, because that's what I do every week. And if you're afraid of getting depressed, know that I have jingles. I use humor. My most popular feature is called Numbnuts of the Week. I cover reactors under the Duck and Cover Report, and I will do anything I can to inject humor into the show, because you gotta laugh, because if not, you're gonna cry, suck your thumb, and curl fetal under the covers. Can't do that. You can do that for a short time. You're not allowed to do that for any extended time. After that, get up and get active. There are reactors, 99 of them in operation in the United States. They all need to be shut down. The waste from them needs to be stored in the highest quality casks, such as the ones used in Europe, which can at least store the waste relatively safely for 100 years. The ones that the NRC approves and that are in the process of being used all over the United States, especially down here in San Onofre, is the cheapest one available that cannot be fixed, cannot be monitored. If a microscopic crack occurs, it will poison the entire environment. And it's going to be sitting right on the coast of California, where the corrosion from the seawater will tear it apart. So you need to find out where your local reactors are, and then find out what the activist groups are in the area. 2 groups for you to contact would be Beyond Nuclear and another one which is Nuclear Information and Resource Service, but all you have to remember is the acronym NIRS. Both of those are .orgs. They're national organizations that cover this. There are also regional organizations. They can help put you in touch. After that, we need to get rid of nuclear bombs. We need to stop uranium mining, stop the manufacture of uranium, the purification of uranium or weapons grade plutonium, because we've got more than enough to blow this planet to smithereens. We need to fund research at a high level. I mean, come on, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, take your billions of dollars and fund a $1 billion prize for whoever comes up with a working, scalable model of how to neutralize the nuclear radiation that has already been produced and is poisoning the world. Each of us on a personal level have to learn how to take care of our health in the face of this nuclear assault. And just again, to reiterate the obvious from my perspective, listen to Nuclear Hot Seat, because this is what I do every week, and I do everything in my power to make the information palatable and actionable. We can beat our breasts and wail to the wind, but that won't do anything. But right now, what you can do is contact your local representative and tell them that the mothers of North St. Louis need to have the bill passed that will get the Army Corps of Engineers to take over the remediation of the site at the Westlake landfill that has all that radioactive waste in it, and at the same time say, dump Gina McCarthy. Gina never met a nuke I didn't like and cover for McCarthy as head of the EPA, because that agency has gone over to the dark side and all they do is cover for the nuclear industry. You can start out with that. Make a phone call, write a letter, send an email, but start getting active, because we're all already radioactive. And let's get angry and do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys want to listen to Nuclear Hot Seat Live, it's Saturdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern on ucy.tv. But in addition to that, please go to YouTube, look up Nuclear Hot Seat videos, and subscribe to Libbe's channel. It's important that we all get educated on this issue and then try to bring our friends, neighbors, and colleagues up to speed on what's going on, because it's their futures too. And we all need to get active, because, my God, you mentioned Bill Gates. I had to chuckle because I know Bill Gates is so busy with his eugenics depopulation vaccines that he doesn't have time to spend on this one. And maybe this is all by design, Libbe. Maybe what they're trying to do is call the population, and a little radiation can't hurt to that extent. If they want to reduce population, they're doing a really good job.
What I find astonishing is that they seem to consider themselves immune to the consequences of their actions. And nobody is. Earth is a rock in the middle of a bubble in the middle of nowhere. What happens on Earth stays on Earth unless they have compelling connections to other planets and think that they're going to be able to get away with this, when in truth, even bosses have bosses. And just because they may think they're at the top of the food chain, as the famous Twilight Zone chapter said about To Serve Man when the Canaanids came to the planet, it was a cookbook. That was how they were serving man. I don't think anybody gets out of this unscathed. And I just want to encourage them, in addition to the links you so kindly presented, go to nuclearhotseat.com, because there's plenty of enrichment material and links to further articles and information and videos and the like that you can find there.
Any other hot spots in the country? We haven't even talked about Indian Point. Do you just want to give us a laundry list of other concerns that people should know about? Because the radiation issues are not limited to what's going on with Fukushima.
There's no place in this country that is not impacted. Indian Point, as of the most recent news, the radiation level there's tritium in the groundwater, in the water that's being released from the plant, that has shown up in a sample well very close by, that is 65,000% higher than the upper EPA limit on what is acceptable. And that limit is not safe in and of itself. And it has been estimated by the people I talk with that within 2 months, that water can migrate into the Hudson River. And then you're talking about the water supply for New York City. We have, as I said, North St. Louis, which is a huge hot spot of contamination from the buried waste and the encroaching fire. We have every nuclear reactor in the country. We have the waste isolation pilot plant, which is supposed to be a repository for low to mid-level plutonium contaminated nuclear waste from the weapons manufacturing process. This is in Carlsbad, New Mexico. 2 years ago, they had an explosion underground that contaminated the underground storage area, and also for the first 33 minutes released americium and plutonium into the environment. That has not been cleaned up. They're trying to say it's going to be cleaned up. It's a lie. If they're honest about it, they'll probably never be able to get that thing open. We've got no place to store the waste, and we keep creating it. If you just look, if you want to shoot an email to me at nuclearhotseat.com, go to the site, shoot me an email, and I can point out other places, or you can just Google nuclear problems and put in your zip code or your area, and you will find out exactly what's happening. It's a terrifying list.
Yeah, it most certainly is, and it's such a huge topic. There's so much to talk about, and 40 minutes does not do it justice. So guys, if you want to learn more, go to nuclearhotseat.com. And again, please do subscribe to the channel, Nuclear Hot Seat Videos. Let's get that subscriber base up and let's spread the word, because doing wonderful activism on behalf of all of us is Libbe Halevy. And we really do appreciate your time. Thank you, Libbe.
My pleasure, anytime.
Guys, thank you for your support at sgtreport.com and thelibertymill.com. Real news, truthful news, the absolute antidote to corporate propaganda, 24/7. We're all in this mess together. Have a great week.